Welcome to the Communication and Relationship Getting What You Want LinkedIn Live. This is Harrison with Victoria. Welcome, Victoria.
Hey, welcome everyone. My name is Victoria. Yes, I'm the CEO of GoZone Group. So we are
All
going.
right. And
Yes,
yes,
go ahead.
and my name is Harrison. I'm the co-founder of Gold Zone Group, and we are a small group of companies that has a leadership center for training leaders, our leaders especially, coaching, training, and consulting leaders, as well as a technology company, a wellness center, a medical clinic, and a few other companies in our group, investment company also. So we're looking for projects to invest in and acquire. So if that's you, you're in the right place. Today, we are talking about communication. That's a subject very near and dear to my heart. That's a subject that impacts all of us. And relationships and communication seem to go together like this. When the relationship's great, the communication's good. And when the relationship sours, the communication sours. And the question is, which one goes first? Does the relationship sour and then the communication? Or is it the other way around? So, Victoria, you're the CEO of Gold Zone Group.
Yep.
Please introduce yourself. Why are you here? Why did you choose this subject for today's LinkedIn Live?
So, yes, why am I here? Who am I? So some of you might have read a few of my posting and my story. And, you might notice that I'm very passionate about leadership. And even though we have a small group of companies that does different things, we believe that leadership is everything. It doesn't matter what industry you're in, you cannot escape from leadership. And why communication is because as a leader, you're going to work with teams, you're going to work with clients, you're going to work with vendors, you're going to work with investors for some of you. And you can't escape from communication. And communication is the key to getting what we want. If we don't communicate, how do we know what people want and how do we tell people what we want? And to me, that's a very important aspect of being a leader. And that's the reason why I chose this subject today. And I also, working with so many people over the years, I would say that that's probably one of the biggest challenge that people face. And in fact, a lot of people, even people who have learned some form of communication technique, still have trouble in the area of communicating what they want and to be consistent with what's on their mind and what they put it out there. It's not that easy because most people don't talk about why that's the case, and we can learn all the techniques we want. But why is it that even with great techniques and skill set, we still have trouble with that? So that's my summary.
That's a good point, Victoria. Why is it with training and techniques and skills and all of this, why is it that people struggle with communication?
Yes. Is that a question for me?
That's a question for you. Why do people struggle with communication, even though we know all these techniques and have these tools?
Well, I want to before I answer the question or before I share my experience about that, maybe if you have, what do you think for the people for the participants here, right? What do you think that's, what's in the way of people communicating what they want? And why is it that despite the communication skill that we learn, this is still a problem? And you can comment on the stream. You can text what do you think it is? In my opinion, there's no right or wrong answer, but it's good to know, what you're thinking, and then we can address it accordingly. Whatever that work for us, we will be sharing, and and whatever that work for you, you can also share on the comment.
Okay, just bear in mind, Victoria, that there's a bit of a lag.
Yes.
Probably at least 30 seconds from when you say something to when people hear it.
Correct.
So you just keep going.
Yeah. So should I talk about what's in the way? Answer the question? Well, the biggest problem that that most of us have is emotion. I can think what I want here. Most of us are mentally very developed. So we well, actually, that's not necessarily the only reason, but a lot of us might have something in our mind that we know what we want, but to say out loud takes courage, takes confidence, and takes clarity. And to have courage, confidence, and clarity takes some form of emotional understanding to be able to say it out. And to me, in my own experience and working with other people, the biggest thing in a way when it comes to emotion is fear. Fear of what the other person is going to think about me, and fear of are they going to say yes or are they going to say no? What if they say no? What am I going to say next? Fear of being rejected, fear of am I asking too much? Fear of whether, well, it's all the fear of what will people say, and whatever that's connected to that.
So you're saying that emotion is the thing that gets in the way of people communicating, and
Yes.
fear particularly, and worrying about what people think, and are they going to give you what you want? Because the title of this session is Getting What You Want.
Yes.
And communication is the thing that's in the way. And you're saying that emotion is what sabotages good communication.
Yeah.
So which comes first, Victoria? Is it that the relationship declines or the communication declines? Which one sours first?
Repeat the question again. Can communication decline or relationship decline, right?
Yep. Which one goes first? Because we have relationship on one hand and communication on the other, and they're interrelated. Which one sours first?
Well, it's the communication that sour first, right? Because
Because most people think it's the other way around, isn't it?
yes.
So what you're saying is the communication goes out.
Yeah. Well, it's
And
very simple.
yep.
From
Go
my
on.
experience, if I'm not happy with something and I'm not able to say it, I'm gonna not say anything, right? And the other party, and I will have a sour face, and I'm gonna leave it up to the other person to guess what I'm actually thinking. And if the other person don't have the skill set or ability to ask me what's on my mind, they're gonna keep quiet too, because they're gonna afraid that the time bomb is gonna be ticking, and that they rather not ask anything than to they rather keep quiet than to ask me anything. And what that does is that it brings a distance in a relationship. It's both at work and at home.
So you're saying that when people keep quiet is one way that a lot of people handle it. And by keeping quiet, it creates a distance in the relationship. So
Yep.
they might have started out here, and then by keeping quiet, the relationship just goes like that.
Yeah.
And then they expect that it's going to resolve itself. But how many times does the relationship just continue to have more gap in it, to
No.
cool, to become less close, less intimate, less frequent? So the other problem is when someone over communicates, right?
Oh yes, dominate the whole conversation.
So if someone's over dominating, you could say it looks like this, and they're pushing in on the other person. And when one person's pushing in on the other, doesn't it cause the other person to do this?
Yes.
To push them back like that? And so when this person stops communicating and goes back to where they were, then you end up with this gap in relationship. And then they come back in and have another go at it, and the person goes further and further away.
And then
they
they
think
wonder why they are not talking.
that's right. So what ends up happening is this person will then reciprocate and do that, push the other person back,
Yep.
and then they'll push back and they'll go back and forth like this. So this is what you have with a lot of communications, and then people think this is a good way to relate, and they feel like they're making progress. But actually, when you stop doing that, the relationship goes like this.
Yes.
So no communication, too much communication are the extremes that I notice.
Yep.
I've done both. How about you?
Yep. I've done both too. I've done the withholding one and over talking.
And did either of them give you what you want?
No, if I underdo it, I get resentful and I don't get what I want. If I over talk, I'm not actually listening to the other person and I can't give them what they want. If I don't give them what they want, they are not going to give me what I want.
That's
That's
describing a lot of
really,
relationships.
yeah. And a lot of people try very hard. It's not that people are not trying. But it can be very frustrating. It can be very frustrating when you don't, like, I know that a lot of leaders complain or frustration is people don't speak up. My team don't speak up. They just keep quiet. You ask them a question and they just go mute. Or they will just be a yes man, or they'll either be a yes man or they resist.
So this yes ma'am, yes sir happens when you're the CEO in your case, and you have people whose livelihoods are dependent on keeping a job with you.
Oh my God, yes.
And then they're not going to say anything that might upset you because they want to keep their job security.
Yeah.
So if you have too many of these kind of people on a team and they don't speak up, then how do you have synergy on a team when people don't speak up? Because someone has the answer to a particular problem or some creative solution and they don't speak up because they don't want to get it wrong, they don't want to look bad, and they don't want to say the wrong thing. And then so this causes a lot of low performance.
Yes.
So what do you have to do as a leader in order to get people to speak up?
Well, I think from a company's point of view, we need to set a foundation and a culture where speaking up is part of, where it provides safety for people to allow people to say what they need to say, and that they are not going to be punished just because they say the wrong, because there's no such thing as wrong thing. And I think everyone needs to be trained in communication so that people can communicate responsibly and to minimize the blame culture. Because speaking up, I think when I reflect on many of the people that we work with, right, one of the biggest fear, even the people at a C-suite level, they don't want to be blamed. No one likes to be blamed. Anytime there's a sensitivity that I'm going to be blamed for something, as a leader, it becomes a little bit more difficult, which means that the leader has to put in a culture, or the organization has to have a culture where how can we do it responsibly without blaming other people for, how do we take ownership of our individual roles and responsibility, and to support each other to grow. Support each other to get the job done. Support each other to be okay to make the mistake and to be able to learn together. That's
So the
one
thing
of the
that you said, Victoria, that stands out to me is you said the culture.
Yeah.
So you have to have an organization culture.
Yes.
Doesn't that apply to the team? The team has to have a team culture. And then also at home, if you extend this same communication and relationship to the home front and in primary relationships as well as family relationships with children, etc., aren't children the same? If it's not safe for them to speak up, they're going to go quiet.
Yes.
And they're going to have problems at school, with friends, and in life, and they won't feel safe or comfortable opening up and sharing with someone who can do something about it. And then this has a very negative consequence on the child, on the relationship, and on the family.
It's true.
And then I notice this is mirrored in the workplace, is that people often, might not be a very popular thing to say, but people behave like children. The boss takes the role as the parent, and and the team members behave like, children. And here in Asia, because we're coming to you live from Singapore. So here in Asia, we have a lot of family businesses, and the working culture is more family oriented.
Yes.
And if I can share this for a minute, Victoria. So in Asia here, with family oriented, it's more like Louis Vuitton LVMH, the group holding company, and Bernard Arnault, who's now the richest man. Maybe he got overtaken again, but he's the richest man on the planet. And I was listening to him talk the other day, and he said that number one, Louis Vuitton doesn't do any marketing and they don't sell anything. And I'm like, huh? What? That's one thing that stood out to me. Huh? And then the second thing he said is he said that we are a family. And so when we hire people, they are joining the Louis Vuitton family, the LVMH family. And I thought, that's very interesting, because on the other hand, you have Netflix, the American company that we all love to watch shows on. And if you listen to the founders of Netflix and you read about their culture, they say, we are not a family, we are a sports team. If you don't perform, you are out. So here in Asia, we're more family oriented, aren't we?
Yes, it is.
So doesn't that play out in our organizations and on our teams, where we tend to have these great parts of the family culture, and then we have the downside where people play out all the obligations and withholding and all the communication issues that cause dysfunction in the family?
Yes, it's true. I have this as a senior executive that I talked to recently. She told me that they have this. I think it's a great thing that the company is doing. The company has been around for a long time. They are in logistics, and they have this very old security guard. They actually don't have a job for him, but because he has been with the company for a long time, so they kept him, pay him a basic salary for him to have something to do, and that he can't even walk properly, but he ended up becoming their delivery man to collect stuff. But he basically does nothing much. So it's part of taking care of him, because he's a senior. Well, he has been around for a long time.
So is it good that a company takes care of people? Because today we see a lot of layoffs and there's a lot of AI disrupting things, and people are losing their jobs and have a lot of fear of job security. And then the changes are coming really fast. AI seems to have burst on the scene, even though it's been developed over a long period. And it's a bit like the exponential curve. It's been brewing for a while, and then suddenly it hit us as if it's out of nowhere.
Yep.
So then, do we want to work for companies that are all performance oriented, that you have to perform according to the organization in order to keep your role? Is that what we want?
I would say that, especially the youngsters these days, I don't think that's what they want. I think it's gearing towards, they want to feel like they belong to. These days, a lot of our generation, so both Harrison and I, we are Generation X. He's the early Generation X, I'm the late Generation X. And in our generation, it's very different. We are more into iron rice bowl, and that we are more driven by security. Our idea of work life is very different from the younger generation these days. So for us, not so much for the two of us, for a lot of our generation, they are happy to keep a job, happy to have security, and the belonging part, right, probably happened. The feeling like wanting to belong to something usually happen at a midlife crisis, after a certain success, after building up a certain income, and probably start to feel like there's not much fulfillment. Whereas the younger generation are starting to feel that at a younger age, they want something that they want to do, something that gives them freedom. Not all, but a lot of them. I would say a good percentage. Give them freedom and help them to feel like they belong to something. And yes, they want to make money, but at the same time, they don't want to do a job for the sake of doing a job. It's not just a job for job's sake.
So in that context, these different generations, do they have different styles of communicating?
Oh, yeah.
Does the young generation communicate differently than the older generation?
Yes. Hey, I want to know how many people here are in Gen X. How many people are in the younger generation, the Gen Z? Because that's what we are talking about, Gen Z. The Gen Z are the people who just started work, or have been in the workforce for a few years? If you are willing to share that, which generation you're from.
Great.
Yeah.
Carry
Yes.
on.
So yeah, I think the way we communicate has to be different, and we have to learn to understand each other, the different. And I've been posting about that because I feel that it's really an important subject for us to be able to work together in a more harmonious way, and with more that will lead to more cooperation, less conflict, less fight, less argument. And the only way to do that is to allow ourselves to understand each other. And I'm sorry to say that I know I hear a lot of people complaining about each other's generation. And that's part of the problem in a workforce, right? So Gen X will be complaining about Gen Z for not being committed, not being loyal, and are flaky. I mean, these are some of the things that I hear. And well, obviously Gen Z will feel like they are not being heard. And then there's all the in-between generation. They don't feel understood.
So Victoria, do the Boomer, Gen X, do we over communicate or under communicate?
Which one? Boomer and Gen X under communicate. But
And
we
the
are
younger generation, under or over?
Generally over, but I think there are still a lot of people who under communicate, didn't have the courage or space to communicate, but over communicate, because I think with social media there's more allowance for us to vent, to share our point of view, which is great.
I think today there's more over communicating because people are used to social media, making videos of themselves, posting text, making comments, and engaging this way. And I think there's a shortage of people listening, because this is the other part of the communication challenge that we started talking about, where people under communicate and when they over communicate. And if somebody's over communicating, the other person's not listening because they're switched off. And if someone is under communicating, then neither party is listening.
Yes, exactly. Hey, I'm curious, Gen Y is from what age to what age? I only know Gen X, Gen Z. What age, and millennia? So is Gen Y younger than millennia? Because we have a few Gen Ys here, stuck between Gen X and Gen Z. That is too funny. So yeah. Yes. So how do we bridge that, Harrison? Because the other thing is, I also shared how when we communicate, right, it's not what we say, it's what people receive from our communication. And most people don't take that into consideration. They expect a lot of us. Well, I can say I'm guilty of that too. I assume that just because I say something, the other person can understand me. Because it's not that complicated. What if I try to explain something, or I try to say something to someone to get a job done? From my point of view, it might be an easy job to do. It might be an easy thing to implement. But what if from the other person's point of view, it's not as easy as what I think? Because my level of experience might be different from the person that I'm talking to.
Well, here's the thing, Victoria. In my experience, most people are communicating because they want the other person to do something, or they want them to hear what they have to say. And this is a one-way communication, and it's not very effective. It's hit and miss. And what we want to have is a two-way communication, which means that we want to make sure that the other party has heard what we intended them to hear and is going to do what we want them to do. And maybe the purpose of the communication needs to be thought about before we open our mouth or start on our keyboards. If we're clear what the purpose of it is, then we can think about what is the best way for me to communicate with the other party. And what a lot of us do as a mistake is we assume everybody's the same. And we want everybody to hear us in the way that we like to communicate. So if we like to text, we want everybody texting. If we like video calls, we want everybody doing video calls. But the best communicators, they have a secret. And I think the secret is available to all of us.
Yep.
The number one thing the best communicators do, they communicate in a way that can be heard by the listener. So they'll change their style depending on who they're talking to. And this is way more effective. That's the first part, is to communicate in the way the person can hear. And if you're clear what your intention is, if you want someone to love you, you're going to communicate one way. If you want them to hate you, communicate another way. If you want them to be scared of you, communicate another way. So
It's
people
true.
don't think about this. They just blurt it out.
Harrison,
And-
yeah,
Yep.
carry on.
So this part of the communication is real important, is understanding who you're communicating to and what you want.
Harrison,
And yep.
yeah, I wanted to, I know, I can't help it. When you are sharing what you just shared, it reminds me of the very first time I heard you explaining communication using a printer.
Yeah.
I thought that's a great way to understand communication from a different perspective. Would you be willing to share? Because you're
Sure.
good at explaining those technical things in a simple way.
Sure. Let's see how fast I can explain it. When I was younger, I used to be a computer engineer, and I used to do field service. So when the computer would break down, they'd call us up and I would go running to help them fix it. My clients were lawyers, stockbrokers, car dealerships, and companies like this. So their computer was mission critical. And often they'd have to print out contracts and all sorts of things. So when the printer broke down, I would have to look at what's wrong with the printer. So I learned how printers work, and it helped me to understand communication, because if the computer is sending signal to the printer, it doesn't know whether the printer is going to print what the computer wants or not. What it has to do is it has to send a message to the printer and say, are you there? Hello. And if there's a lot of printers out there, if they all reply, then whoops, you get overwhelmed. So it has to send a message to the printer it wants to communicate with. That printer replies and says, I'm here, but I got no ink. So then the computer can tell the operator, hey, put some ink in. And so there's a whole lot of back and forth communication happens between a computer and a printer, just like us as a human being. And we miss these steps, and we wonder why miscommunication causes so many upsets. And with the printer, the computer says, are you there? The printer says, yes, I'm here. I have ink. I'm ready to print. I've got paper. What do you want me to print? And then the computer will send instructions with exactly what to print, how it wants it to look, and what colors it wants. And then the printer will let the computer know that it received the file, and then it's printing. And then it will update it, how much of it has printed, how much is left, and then it will tell the computer when it's finished, job done. And so the computer knows that the print is finished, and then the operator can go and pick it up and see whether they got what they wanted. And if you apply this to human relationships, how many times are we like a computer just dumping out on the printer? And then we want color, and the printer's doing black and white. We want it on A4 and it's on A3, and we wonder why there's so many problems.
Yeah.
And Victoria, I'm sorry, because you get on my soapbox. So much of leadership is communication and relationship oriented, and people suck at communicating. If you have a job and a title, people will do what you want because you make them. They have no choice.
Yeah. The interesting thing about your printer analogy is that the two things that there are more than two things, but the two things that stick to me as you're sharing is that computer has no feeling. So they either get an instruction or they don't get an instruction. And the people are the one fixing the instruction. So that's one thing. And second thing is that the specific of the instruction in a computer is amazing. And as human being, we expect people to give us what we want without being specific. Most people's communication are very unclear, vague, and just non-specific. And we wonder why we are not getting what we want.
I'll give you an example, Victoria. If I say the term doghouse, what comes to your mind when I say doghouse?
Doghouse, for me, for me is a doghouse, a house that, there are two, well, a doghouse that a dog live in, right? A kennel.
And what's the first picture that you see? Doghouse.
This, that, a small kennel, doghouse.
So like from a movie.
Yeah. That's my visual.
So if you live in an HDB or a small apartment, what does your doghouse look like?
Don't know. What if I live in a HDB apartment?
What does your doghouse look like?
I don't know.
It's probably a mat or a basket
right.
on the floor, right?
Yes.
So the doghouse is something on the floor. Whereas if you live in a landed property, you live in a mansion, your doghouse can have a slide, it can have a ladder, it can have multiple layers, levels, it can have, automatic feeders and all kinds of things. So when you say doghouse to someone, depending on who you're talking to, they'll have all kinds of pictures in their mind. So
yes,
in order to communicate properly, don't we need to know what's in the other person's mind when we say something like doghouse or we say leadership? That's another example. There's like 1,000 pictures of leadership.
Yep. Yes.
We have to agree on what we're talking about. And that's the thing with the printer and the computer analogy, is that the computer and the printer follow a communications protocol. And so when there's a breakdown in the result on the printer, you work backward to identify where the breakdown is. And whether it's a printer fault on the print head, on the processor, on the cabling, on the connector, in the computer, in the software, in the driver. So you just work backward upstream to figure out where the problem is, and then you can identify it. And human communications are complicated because of emotion that you mentioned earlier, and because people don't have an understanding of how to communicate. They don't duplicate.
Yep, true.
So you know how the printer would communicate back to the computer and say, I'm ready. Job done.
Yeah.
Yes, you want 3 pages.
True.
You want it in A3. And the computer can say, yes, 3 pages A3. So they'll go back and forth like this. But in human communication, we make so many assumptions. And in fact, when I first came to Singapore, and we're learning Singlish, right? So how much of our Singlish is a short code for communication? So we just go like this.
It's so true. And even how we put in Asia, or at least in Singapore, we would say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. But in some country, I don't even know what this means. It definitely is not
the
6.
Texas Longhorns or something, right? Or it's Hawaii Hang Loose.
I don't know. Yes. Yeah, I think it's that's why understanding each other is so important. Actually, from the protocol point of view, since you mentioned about the communication step and protocol, right? And a lot of people say communication is an art. So with this understanding, is it really an art, or is it actually a system, a protocol that we can follow as long as our emotion don't get in the way?
I believe, Victoria, that communication is a system that anyone, if you learn the system, you can duplicate it and you can get the result every time. And if you want a yes or a no from your communication, you can get a yes or a no. And it's not hit and miss. It is very predictable, very reliable if you understand how to do it. But most people don't have communication training.
Yes, agree.
An old mentor of mine, his name was Marshall Thurber, and he used to say that true communication is the result you get, the response you get. So it's not what you say, it's the response you get from the other person. That's how you know if you're effective in your communication, you're getting what you want. And this is hard for a lot of people to accept, is that your result is your guru or teacher. And then you work backward from your result and say, did I get what I want? Yes or no? And what can I do differently to get a better outcome? And this way of thinking sounds to me, because I'm an engineer by background. So as an engineer, this makes perfect sense. Did you get what you want? No. Why not? They're a dickhead, of course. That's why. Well, am I going to improve anything if I think they're a dickhead? They
No.
might be a dickhead, but actually this is not going to help me get what I want when I go deal with the next one. And maybe the problem is not them, maybe the problem's me. But then that takes a certain level of self-confidence to look at ourselves and say, you know, I didn't get what I wanted. What do I need to do different to get a different result with this particular person? And then when you apply that, you can improve your communication every day. You imagine you make a small improvement on your communication, you're going to go through the roof.
Yeah.
And then you get what you want, because that's ultimately what the purpose of communication is.
Agree.
Otherwise, hey, why bother? Why bother communicating? Just have your gums flat and, you know, hear yourself.
It's true. But people like to hear themselves. That's the problem.
On that note, Victoria, this is one of the blocks to communication, is needing to be heard.
Yeah.
In that we don't feel that people hear us, and we feel like our opinion's not valued. We feel like nobody's listening. We feel discounted. We feel undervalued, underpaid, under-recognized, underappreciated. And then this comes through the communication. So we communicate in a way that nobody wants to hear us.
Well, the more, I'm sorry to say, the more needy I used to be that way. The more needy I am to need to be heard and to need someone to value me, the worse my communication gets. The harder it is, it becomes worse. And it's just very unattractive from that place.
Being needy, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely is another block. Being needy, like being attached to the outcome. The more attached you are to the outcome, the less likely you are to get what you want.
Yeah.
So in order to communicate effectively, you have to detach from the result, while at the same time going for the best outcome you can. So detaching is an emotional process where you let go of whether you get what you want or not. And this is hard for a lot of people to detach.
Yeah, because a lot of even saying that, right, people get, I notice a lot of people get confused between detach versus giving up. Detach is not giving up. They're very different.
Giving up would be where you stop communicating.
Yeah.
Detaching is where you can continue to communicate. You change the way you communicate based on the result you get, but you're definitely going for a result, but you're not emotionally at the effect of whether you get it or not.
Yeah.
Because then you're going to have all that stress that we talked about last week with anticipatory stress. Oh, I'm not going to get what I want. The stress levels go up and the prefrontal cortex shuts down, and then our blinkers come on. And then how effective are we at communicating from that place?
Not effective.
So what's the power mode when it comes to communication? Is clear, certain, confident. You know what you want, you know how to get it, and you know why the other person would want to do it, because you got to deal with the most important part, which is what's in it for me.
As in,
not
what's
in it for me,
for them.
what's in it for them? What's in it for you? This is why we want to communicate, is we have to deal with what's in it for the other person. Why should they do it? And you can either get compliance through a gun to their head and make them do it. Then you got to keep the gun there, or a carrot, holding a carrot in front of them. But then, hey, who likes that?
No one likes that. Well, they can say yes to you in a moment, but you know, you're gonna get repercussion from that. So we have Dr. Marian. She said, is it, which you sort of, you did mention a little bit about assumption. She said, is it also possible that we assume a lot, as in, oh, thank you, as in we assume they understood what we said?
Yes.
Yeah. The more assumption we make, the more assumption I make, the worse it is. You have to clarify. You can make assumption, but you got to clarify. At the minimum, you got to clarify from the other person. Is it accurate? Am I hearing you correctly? Is this what you're saying? Like simple question like this can make such a big difference, because just by asking that question, And if you are genuinely interested, it's not just being a puppet, like repeating just using a script. If you are genuinely interested to understand the other person, they can feel it and they will feel heard just by a simple question. Does that help?
And from my point of view, Victoria, assumptions are the worst because you assume that the other person knows what you're talking about. You assume that the other person is on the same level. You assume that they're going to do it. And the
Yes.
only way to know these things is through communication, isn't it? And not
Yep.
making assumptions.
Yep.
And asking questions, because aren't questions the vehicles that drive the communication, isn't it?
Yes. And we have Clifford saying that communication on computers and in person differ because computer has little feeling. Actually, computer has no feeling. So it is true. And that's why as a human being, learning how to handle our own emotion can help us to follow the effective communication protocol a lot easier. And isn't that what distinguishes us between human being and AI? That AI doesn't have feeling, but we have feelings. And that's what makes us human. And that's where for me, that's actually our superpower. We can connect with each other because we can feel each other. Because
let's talk about this. Computer doesn't have feeling, but it follows the protocol. And you don't want the computer having feeling. Like if the printer had a feeling about the computer, then it's not going to print it out because it's got feelings and it's being resentful and it's withholding. We don't want this. And in a human relationship situation, if someone's not communicating, we don't know whether they didn't hear us or whether they've got feelings and they're doing it deliberately. So if you follow a communication system like a protocol like the computer does, you will be able to tell whether they didn't hear you or whether they're deliberately withholding or some other thing is going on. And to the point here on the screen about emotion being disruptive is that if we communicate without emotion, we're not going to get what we want, because emotion is required for people to take action. So people think emotion is negative, but it isn't. There's no good or bad, right or wrong emotion. There's simply an emotion that has people responding in a certain way, feeling more connected, feeling of understanding, feeling of joy, feeling of love, connection, intimacy, feeling of alignment, feeling of inspiration, feeling angry, feeling resentful, feeling hostile, feeling like undervalued, underappreciated. All these things are feelings. And a lot of people have these and they play out on the teams and in the offices all the time. So we have to understand all these different emotions and communicate in a way that we can recognize them. And then when we see somebody is upset, how do we communicate in an efficient way to help them with that upset? And I think this upset part of communication is something that people don't understand how to do, because just telling someone, don't be upset.
You shouldn't be upset. You are thinking too much. You're overthinking.
Hey, has that ever worked for you? Telling someone don't be upset?
Yeah. So it's true. It doesn't work. I mean, it's not effective. In fact, that will discount them even further. Like, if people are upset, they are upset. It is, even though the situation doesn't, regardless of the situation, whether they should be upset or not, it doesn't matter. If they are upset, that means they are feeling the upset. So it's important to acknowledge that yes, they are upset, and that understanding why they are upset will dissipate the situation more than just telling them that, don't be upset over such a minor problem.
And then get more upset.
Yep. And that you're gonna get more.
And then here on the screen, we have a comment from Angie that the tone of voice will also determine the outcome. And I'd like to talk about tone of voice, because tone of voice communicates emotion.
Yep.
If we use a monotone, why are we monotone? Monotone is a feeling. And what the feeling communicates of monotone is suppression control and restriction, is that we have a whole lot of emotions that we can't handle. And so we are suppressing them, which makes us monotone. So once we deal with those emotions we're suppressing, then we can have the full range of nuance. And the more that we can communicate in a way that inspires other people to take action, the more we'll get what we want. Because people take action emotionally, not mentally. Mental is easy. Emotion is the thing that drives us to do anything.
Agree. Yes, mental is easy. A lot of time we can make decision mentally, but how we know where our real emotion is when we are about to take action. And most people don't necessarily take the action that they think they want to do in their mind. And we give ourselves reasons why we don't do that. But the real reason, well, the main reason, the most common reason I hear is, oh, I procrastinate. Oh, I just don't have time. Oh, something else is more important. Oh, I mean, there's a lot of, it's very common that people will give themselves reason because our mind, we need some logical, it's normal that we need some logic to explain to ourselves why we do something or don't do something. But from my experience, the real reason why most people want to do something but won't do it is really just emotion.
What you're talking about, Victoria, is rationalizing. So
Yeah,
rationalizing. We'll have a behavior where we do or don't do something, and then we will rationalize it after the fact to explain why we did or didn't do something.
That's right.
And the most common one is I'm too busy. I'm busy, I'm busy, I'm busy. And that's the affirmation that they constantly repeat, how busy they are.
Yep.
I'm so busy, I'm so busy, I've got no time, I've got no time. Well, if you know anything about basic affirmations, anything that you repeat over and over, you're going to believe, and then you're going to create that.
Yep.
And doesn't that apply to communication here? Is if we say, I'm a terrible communicator, I'm no good at communicating, I'm not a communication person. And if we say that repeatedly, then we're not going to put the effort in to improve, and we're going to believe it, and we're going to accept it as a fait accompli, or, there's nothing we can do.
Yes. Well,
and this is not true. And from
Yeah.
my personal experience, I used to be a terrible communicator. I used to clam up. I used to be moody. I used to be monotone. I used to be quiet under pressure. I used to not like to talk on groups. I was okay one-on-one, but put me on a group, so I had a lot of problems communicating that I had to work through. And it became something that I got very good at by committing to master it. And I said, this really sucks, because if you want to get ahead as a leader, if you want to get ahead in your career, if you want to have great relationships, if you want to be good at anything, you have to be able to communicate. And the better you can communicate, the better you do. And if you want a promotion and the boss thinks you're a terrible communicator, quiet in the corner saying nothing, you think sitting there saying nothing is going to give you the result that you want, they're going to promote you? No. They promote the people they can see. And in order to be seen, we have to master the art of communication. And that's why it's so important. So I committed to master it. And I'm still mastering different pieces of communication, but I'm a heck of a lot better than I used to be.
Agree. Well, I can relate to that. Used to suck at communication. Can't even ask a simple thing like, what I wrote in my event in the page on my page where I was sharing about this event. I can't even ask for what I want for my meal. When my ex-partner asked me, "Oh, what do you want for lunch?" I don't know, anything.
Anything.
I couldn't even say what I wanted on my mind. It sounds ridiculous, but that's a fact.
And then how often would you go to dinner at places that you didn't like, didn't want, weren't happy?
The problem with that is that it's so often that, I end up being a wet fart at the meal because I couldn't ask for what I want, so I wasn't happy. So I'll pull a long face, and it's all leading up to the guess game, right? For the other party.
And then, Victoria, the relationship, you must relate to what happened with that relationship is that you become more and more and more distant.
Yes. That's exactly what happened. But I couldn't see, I didn't understand, and I couldn't see it at that time.
So then
yeah.
a lot of people will relate to these kind of experiences with communication. How are they going to improve it? Because we talked about over communicating
Yeah.
and we talked about under communicating. How do we communicate in a way that's in the middle, where there's ask, talk, and listen, asking questions and actually being interested?
Mm. I personally, I feel that it's you got to, the communication is like a vehicle to get you from one place to point A to point B. So the question is, what do you want from if you were to improve in your communication, what outcome do you want from that, and how important is that outcome for you? And I think you've got to decide. You got to have a reason and a purpose why you want to improve in something. In this case, we are talking about communication, but it can be in anything. So getting clear, for me, getting clear what I want is the first step. If I'm not clear and I don't have a reason or a purpose to in terms of the outcome I want, everything is a moot point. You won't have the drive, you won't have the energy, you won't have the time, you won't have the space to go and improve on the area that you want to improve in to get the outcome you want.
So you're saying begin with getting clear what you want.
Yes, and to be okay to acknowledge what you're not happy with. Because I think this is one of the toughest for a lot of people. They if you're not able to, if you're not able to admit what you're not happy with, nothing is going to change. And there's nothing wrong to be unhappy with something in your life. Because if I tell myself I'm happy with something when I'm not happy, then this is communication. Actually, one of the things that when Harrison, you were talking about what we say to ourselves. In fact, that's the biggest communication in our life that really impacts us, is what we say to ourselves in our mind. So if I lie to myself what the situation is, and I keep telling myself that, yeah, it's okay, yeah, everybody else is like that anyway, then then there's nothing to do. It's okay. That's up to individual choice whether they want to do something about it or not. But what I know is that everyone I work with and anyone who actually succeeds at something, they want something more and they are not happy with something.
So when you express or acknowledge that you're not happy with something, how do you handle that unhappiness? Because isn't that what stops people, is
Yeah.
that they don't want to acknowledge it? Because when you acknowledge it, you have to do something about it.
Yeah.
Then you're going to sit in this unhappiness. You're going to be unhappy because I'm not getting what I want, so I'm unhappy. So the more I look at it, the more I think about it, the more unhappy I become. And then a lot of people want to avoid that feeling of unhappiness by telling themselves, don't be unhappy, be grateful. So then
Yeah.
I see a lot of advice where people, make a gratitude journal, focus on gratitude, write down 5 things you're grateful for. I'm going to tell you the number one reason I don't do that. I think it's nonsense. I think it's ridiculous. If you have to have a gratitude discipline, it tells you that you don't feel grateful. So the feeling of gratitude, if you have to make yourself feel gratitude, it means that you're not feeling grateful. So I think a lot of advice out there is like, you take this problem and you cover it up through some kind of discipline that you have to practice every day, right? And every day before we go to sleep, what are you grateful for? Get up, what are you grateful for? Well, what about this? What if you could genuinely switch into a state of gratitude so that everything in your life you're grateful for and you actually feel it? So if you feel grateful for your bottle of water, for your, different things, for your mouse, for your, thing that does your phone, for your remote control, for your phone itself, for the people that join you, for your passport, for your country, for the roads, if you actually understood what it took to create all these things, then you can feel grateful for it all the time. And you notice when you flip out of grateful, you're feeling some other emotion.
Yeah.
But instead of trying to cover up the emotion with an artificial gratitude, if you operate in a state of grace, your communication is going to reflect it. People will respond to you accordingly because people respond to how you feel. If you're feeling gremlin-y or ornery or angry or unhappy or miserable, people are going to respond to you that way, and they're not going to give you what you want. Whereas if you're grateful for every bit of service people deliver to you, every smile, every person you interact with, if you are genuinely grateful, they're going to feel it, and they're going to want to go out of their way to help you and give you things. And I think this part of communication is missing too, Victoria.
Yeah.
Because if you acknowledge that you're unhappy, who's responsible for your happiness? Who's responsible, whether you like your job, your boss, your product, your service, your company? Who's responsible? If you don't like your job, quit and go and find another job. But what a lot of people do, sorry, you got me started. What a lot of people do is they're dating someone, and they say, my girlfriend, she's like this. I'm not that happy. She doesn't really listen to me. I'm like that. I'm going to get me another one. And they go looking around. Ooh, she looks good. Hello. And so they're having one relationship while they're looking for another one, because the other part of this LinkedIn Live is about relationships, right? So they go looking for another date while they're on a date. How crazy is that? That's a lack of commitment. And what kind of response are you going to get? You're going to guaranteeing failure there.
We have a Chinese idiom for that.
So our need for the Chinese idiom. Oh, what's that?
骑驴找马.
Oh, that's such a good one. Can you explain that?
So 骑驴找马 means you are riding a donkey while looking for a horse. But then meanwhile, you are stuck with a donkey.
So if your employer is a donkey and you want to get to a better horse, a racehorse, what's the best way to get on the racehorse is to get off the donkey, isn't it? The longer you're on the donkey and attached to the donkey and have your needs attached to its purpose and mission and vision, the more that it's going to rub off on you, and the more company you keep with the donkey riders and the donkey coaches and the donkey products, the more you're going to create that as an outcome. And I always say to people, if you don't like your company, your boss, your job, your product, your service, if you're the leader, you can change it. But if you're not, you can quit. You should quit now. The minute you know you're not happy, you ask yourself, is this company going to change, or is it me? Is this boss going to change? Maybe if it's not me, maybe if it's them and I really don't want to work there, then quit and go find something better. Don't go look for something better and then quit. It's the wrong way around.
True.
But this is, if you are confident in where you're going, what you're doing, and what you want, that's what you do, isn't it?
Yeah. That's why the part that I shared about getting clarity is important, because you got to be clear. You go work on your confidence and clarity in terms of where you're heading. The reason why people are stuck, in my opinion, is that they are not even clear. They just know they are not happy, but they don't even know what they want. That's why they are stuck in between. And that's actually the worst place to be in, when you're stuck in between.
Stuck in no man's land. That's no
man's
fun,
land. No.
Definitely. So what do we do if how do we improve this communication? We were talking before about getting clear what you want, and we're talking about following a systematic approach, understanding, duplicating, talking from the other person's point of view, not over communicating, not under communicating. We talked about the emotion in it. We talked about putting gratitude on top of it instead of actually feeling grateful. We talked about if you're unhappy, to acknowledge that you're unhappy and then do something about it. And in the same way, if you're not getting the result that you want from the communication, then you work backward to change it.
Yeah.
So if a relationship isn't going the way you want, what do you do? Do you, if you're working for a company, do you just quit? Or do you have a conversation with your boss or your leader and you sit them down and you say, can we talk about how things are going here and what the future looks like? Because right now I'm not really happy with what I'm doing. And then what can we do to solve this in the future? And if you have a really great leader and what you want is really not something the organization can give you, that leader will encourage you to go and find something else, and they'll work with you to find something else and work with you to find another job or another role. They'll move you into departments. They'll move you in a different company. And then you can partner with that person. And isn't this the kind of relationships that we want, Victoria? We want to be
Yes.
in partnerships where you work together
Yeah.
rather than I got to keep all these secrets and I can't tell you.
Yeah. Actually, you remind me of an example last year. I think it was last year or 2 years ago. This guy, I think he's a Gen Z. So he was working in a company. I can't remember his profession, but he shared how he managed to convince. He actually sold his boss the idea of working overseas for 1 month and work remotely and still continue to get paid and to be able to yeah, do work on a different time zone. He thought it was a ridiculous idea at the beginning, but he really, really wanted to do it because he felt like the pandemic, being stuck at home, has been impacting his mental health, according to him. So he wanted a new environment. And meanwhile, his friends overseas, I think he went to the US or Canada, I can't remember. So you can imagine Canada and Singapore, US and Singapore are like totally different, opposite time zone. So he had a lot of consideration, but he was very clear that's what he wanted. And he was quite surprised and he prepared. So this is communication. I think this is a great example of how someone communicate what they want. He went to do research. He went to do up a presentation and to make sure that he's ready to present to his boss or his manager that even though he's going to work overseas, he's still going to produce his value. He's still going to do his work. And he really don't like to work at night, but because of the time zone, he's willing to sacrifice a little bit, compromise that part. But in return, he get most of other things that he want from having a new environment and having a refreshing start while not sacrificing his job. So I thought he explained it very well. And what I know from that example is that he did a lot of research, think about how he want to communicate, and I'm very sure he didn't talk about a lot of details other than some of what he did, but I'm very sure he gave the manager what they want, and the manager said yes quite easily through the whole presentation, and he put in a lot of effort to make sure that the point was gotten across to the manager.
That's a great example.
Yeah, I thought that was fantastic.
Yes. Excellent. So he put the effort in, and that's what it takes, effort, isn't it? How many people want to get what they want without putting anything in? It's like they want to withdraw from the bank account without putting any money in the bank account. And what's going to happen? You all know, you go to the bank, take some money out. What do you have? Nothing. And yet in communication and relationships, aren't most people self-interested, and they want to do withdrawal, and they want to make requests, do this. Hey, what's in it for me? What are you giving to me as an exchange? There's no exchange. And I think this part of relationships, if you go back to how we evolved through villages, we used to live in little villages where people would have relationships with each other, that have conversations, communication, and then they would do favors for each other.
Yeah.
And they'd be mindful of that exchange. Now I think a lot of people just me.
Agree. It's relationship.
So shall we take a few minutes and talk about relationship now? Or is this a good place to finish this live and then we do it about an hour? And we can talk more about relationship. Like this subject, there's so much we can discuss.
Yes.
And so many tips. We could give people more tips on how to do it.
Yeah.
And how to resolve. There's some things come to mind, Victoria, is how do you get in communication with a stranger? How do you make friends? How do you inspire people to take action? How do you build trust? How do you repair a broken relationship? How do you communicate with someone who's ghosted you or who is ignoring your communication? How do you communicate with a team member who's underexpressed, quiet, and resentful, and then their performance is going down? How do you communicate in that instance? So there's so many different environments
Yes.
situations to talk about different ways to communicate.
Well, do we have any questions that you want to ask about communication that you would like to have a solution to? You can just comment on the stream, and meanwhile, we can move on to the relationship topic. Because we're happy to, if you want some tips, if you want some solution to your current communication challenge, you can just comment on the stream. I'm not sure if I can see all the questions and comments, because I notice I'm missing some comments too.
Oh, we got some comments that are not appearing.
Yeah.
I think, Victoria, this is a good place to leave it. And I think in future LinkedIn Lives, we can do it at an hour. We're just at an hour now.
Okay. Yeah.
I think this is a great place to finish and summarize. You want to summarize?
Yes, I want to. I'm just going through the comment to see if I miss out anything that that we can address. Someone talking, I think Sankar was talking about different companies have different culture. Yeah, different companies have different culture. Military has more of command and control mode of communications. Basically, take or give orders. The corporate business may be more liberal. Okay. So yeah, I think in summary, since we're going to end, we're going to wrap it up. In summary, I would say that why communication is so important is because it's really one of the key vehicle for all of us to get what we want. And in order to get what we want, in order to communicate more effectively, first step is to get clear what you want first. Well, first step is to get clear what you want. Because if you are not clear, then everything is a moot point. Everything will become more difficult. And that's why I like to always emphasize on clarity is power. Because when you're clear, you will be able to find a solution, and the solution will come to you. And now that today Harrison shared about how the printer communicate with the computer. And to me, my key learnings when it comes to communication over the years is that I got to be really specific. If I'm not specific, there's no way, or there's very little chance the other person is going to give me what I want. And it's going to be a guess game. I'm going to have a hit and miss. It's going to be less predictable. And I do feel that a lot of people want things to be more predictable, and yet they don't know how to make it more predictable. And yes, we are human beings. When it comes to communication, we can learn the techniques, we can learn the protocol. And I think that's a very important foundation to understand what it takes to be effective in our communication. At the same time, we all got to take into consideration our emotion and our feeling about what we want or what we can have or can't have, and how other people value us or not, and what's our intention. I think this is the other thing that we didn't really mention. When we communicate, being clear with our intention can make a big difference in what comes back to you. Because if you are not clear with what you are intending in your communication, nothing much is going to happen. And from a leadership point of view, the intention makes a big difference in what you're going to get from the people that you're communicating with, whether they are going to be able to get a job done for you or not. And I think the other important factor, I know this one, a lot of people talk about, assumption, which is, assumption is making an ass of you out of me. It's making assumption it really is, and is something that really gets in the way of many people having more of what they want, getting what they want from a communication. And a simple way to clear up assumption is to ask question, to make sure that your interpretation of what the other person is saying is accurate by, in our term, we say duplicating. You duplicate them, or you ask them question if you don't understand. If you don't understand what they are saying, just ask them and tell them that you don't understand. and would they be willing to, are they willing to repeat it, or are they willing to say in another way? What else? Did I miss anything, Harrison? You're on mute. Harrison, you're on mute.
Yes, that's a good summary. Thank you. we also talked about emotion and how it hijacks the communication and gets in the way. And we have to have emotion in our communication, because that's what connects us. That's what has us taking action. And that's what moves us, inspires us, engages us, is the emotion that's in the communication.
And that's what make us human being. And that's where the real connection is the emotion. That we're able to connect with each other emotionally. And I know a lot of people talk about empathy. If I'm not aware of my emotion, I can't have empathy. I can't have true empathy. I might be able to say the word, but I'm not really feeling it. And there's a difference when you're feeling it versus just saying the word.
We also talked about AI and how we need to be better at communicating and building relationships. And you mentioned that AI doesn't have emotion. And I think one of the problems with this is that over time, AI will have emotion.
Yeah.
Right now, it can simulate it. It can use the language of emotion, but it can't necessarily put the feeling in. And what AI can't duplicate is our relationships. And at the same time, I saw where some corporate finance department just got scammed out of $25 million.
Oh my God, yes.
Through videos and having a video meeting with the CEO and the finance team, and there was only one real person in the conversation. And I think this is that means that the video is so good at duplicating us that we can't tell the difference. And I think that's the world that we're coming into.
Yes. Agree. And I
But
think
regardless, if the AI can duplicate our emotion, if it can duplicate our relationships and pretend to be us, think of all the possibilities. We can go to the beach while the AI us.
Well, for us,
like, is this actually Harrison here? Is it me here? Or is it Harrison bot? How do you tell? How do you know that this is not Harrison bot, that I haven't invested in the technology to create a Harrison bot? How do you know?
That's a very good question. Nobody knows.
Nobody knows. In fact, what if I have a little bit of disruption in my, like I could be having my AI bot could be going crazy and having some interference, right? Oh no, it's showing that it's not me.
It's true. And I think it's, one of the way to stand out on LinkedIn, since we're on LinkedIn Live now, is actually for those of you who are interested to stand out more on LinkedIn to get what you want from LinkedIn, whichever that you want, is actually to share more like a human being, which takes emotion. And that's why ChatGPT using AI to phrase our, which we tried, right, Harrison? It doesn't work.
Yes.
And you can tell how it's being done. The standard way of sharing through AI is at the moment is quite easy to see, and people actually respond to it by not responding to it.
So the biggest thing that the AI can't do is go into our memories and bring out our stories. So our stories are unique to us. My story and your story are different. They're unique. And that's what connects us, is through the stories and the telling of that story in a way that it has some connection and some meaning for each person. And even the same incident can have 10 different people having the same event with 10 different stories, 10 different learnings, 10 different interpretations coming out of the same event. So there's an unlimited number of stories to tell. And this is what differentiates us from AI, isn't it?
Yeah.
And that's
Agreed.
the future. Telling the stories is a form of communication. But if you tell a story and your communication's intended to do something different, like it's different vehicles for different situation, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So anything else as you wrap up? Because that's it from me.
No, I think it's a good place to wrap up. And I want to thank everyone. Well, first of all, thank you, Harrison, for co-hosting with me. And I enjoyed the discussion. I enjoyed talking about communication. And it's fun. And for me, it's a meaningful subject for us to discuss. And we can talk about it, for a long time. And I also want to thank everyone who joined us today. Thank you very much for listening in, for spending your precious time with us. I really appreciate that. And I look forward to connecting with you all soon.
And a reminder, we're going to be doing these LinkedIn Lives every week.
Yes, correct. So next week.
We might switch the day, but this time seems to be a good one in the middle of the day. Like noon Singapore time seemed to work very well for a lot of people.
Yeah.
And we can continue that. We just might switch from Wednesday to Tuesday.
Yes.
Tuesday at noon. So this is the plan going forward. And then we'll pick different subjects. So if you're interested in a subject and you'd like us to do a LinkedIn Live on that subject, you just send through your request to Victoria, catch her on LinkedIn, and she's happy to chat with you, answer any questions one-on-one, and love to receive feedback and happy to know everyone. So thank you, everyone. And we look forward to connecting with you more on LinkedIn through your stories and our stories and chatting in between. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.